Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to welcome you to our webinar today in full summer. It's already the 8th webinar we do in our series of webinars as part of the pre-conference process of the Metropolis Conference in Berlin, and it's our 6th webinar on technological change, migration, and the future of work. We welcome you to that. We have still a month to go until the Metropolis Conference in Berlin, and I hope we will meet there personally in person. And today we look on an overly important topic, we feel as our networking unit, which is relevant for all industrialized countries and increasingly so also for the countries in the global south. So also they have an aging population and they need personnel in the care and nursing sector. So some might remember the debates on brain drain we had in the 70s, late 70s and the 80s about the care personnel, about engineers, about physicians moving all around the world. And what we see now is a demand for care workers on all levels of qualification. So all health systems are put to test as they are in need of workers. And there are some hopes on new technologies, and this is why we will focus on the care sector today. And please let me give you some features of the care sector. We see that migrant work is constitutional for the whole care sector. We see that the sector is a sector with a high share of informal work and working conditions with difficult formal regulations. It is a sector with a high percentage of female workers, which is important, which you will see in a moment. It's a sector in which migratory regimes between sending states and receiving states have evolved. And these regimes have clear hierarchies and they are accompanied by a volatile set of bilateral regulations. There are major weak points in the global care chain as we name this, So what are we see weak points in recruitment, in the recognition of professional skills, the prospects of staying for the individual migrant in the place of arrival, and the governance of transnational social welfare. This is what we are looking at in our webinar. So how come the sector is confronted with the new dynamics? Just shortly, I give an introduction and then the speakers come to stage. What makes things so complex, so complicated maybe also? And this is that we have the migrant, her or him, in the middle of the place of origin, in between the place of origin, where normally family networks are at stake, expecting, for example, that money is sent home. They contribute in a way to the national economy. And this is also why we have Jay here. The Philippines are a very good example of a country in which the export of nurses is part of the national history by now. So the migrant is in between the place of origin and the place of arrival. There we have social networks. The degree of integration in the place of arrival depends very much on the degree of disintegration in other circuits, we could say. What we have for many years are and multilateral regulations. What we see now, and this is why the global care chains are important, we see that we have increasingly with neoliberalism, international recruiters. And this is new. Those recruiters take over responsibilities which have been provided for many years by the state. And they start shaping the field. And I think this is of interest, sometimes also of concern or of benefit. We will see. We will speak about that. I was mentioning migratory regimes. What is that? It's far more than the regulation. It includes also the culture of migration. It includes social and political norms, which are important for migration. And together with Margaret Walton Roberts and Brenda Joe, we just published an article in which we start to identify different forms of regimes. So we just as a starting point set, we see a bus stop principle, which is valid, for example, for workers from the Philippines to Singapore, where we see a temporary system which doesn't allow for integration, but has rather extractivist tendencies for the workers. So that would be one form to regulate migration. We have another form, migratory regime, we titled as two-step migration, for example, from India to Canada, where we have potential pathways for the nurses into permanent residency. We see that, but it comes with a price tag of de-skilling and the underutilization of skills. So we have a two-class system coming up. And we have, we identified as a third way to do this global care change, to regulate that chain, the triple win, which has been excuse me, done in the case of Germany. So the gold standard, very high standards you would like to apply of fair recruitment and aiming for fair conditions of exchange. So a quality seal, for example, has come out of that, and Laura will speak about it. The flip side of this state approach, what we heard in our research, was that there's a highly bureaucratic procedure, that it's very costly and lengthy, but then has also good results as people stay for longer and do not change so often the employer. The crucial point here is recognition of degrees and language training. And what we see increasingly, and this is what makes our life more complicated, is that we have such form of local urban assemblages, we call that. So alliances of different stakeholders that become now important. The national scale regulates only partly. We see that the cities, for example, or the urban scale undercuts what the national regulation is, so other players become active. Sometimes they develop into migration industries. So this is what we should have in mind. Only quickly about the mixture of formal and the formal and informal, which is important for Anke. She will speak about insecurity, inequality, intersectionality. We see that on the global scale, sending states have evolved into migrant nurseries. The example here would be the Philippines. So a way of making a living is to send remittances and to continue family life on a distance, I would say. We have also a high degree of informality due to the work, which is often in households where you're very near to the person you work with. There's often no regulation. And we have a high informality also in terms of the free time, where often migrants, pass their free time in certain communities, in certain times and spaces in cities. Here you see as an example the Piazza Duomo in Milan, many years ago. So new technologies have an impact on all this. Excuse me, it's not moving. Yeah, they could have an impact on the organization of work. So many people dream of robots doing the work, or they have digital administrative tools. This is not what we are looking at today in our webinar. We rather look on how workers are recruited, so platforms for recruitment, and we look on transnational social welfare. And as said in the beginning, we speak about recruitment, recognition of professional skills, and transnational social welfare. And I now want to introduce you to the speakers, which are all fantastic, I think. We will start with Professor Dr. Anke Strüver. She's at the University of Graz, a full professor, and she's a specialist on gender, and especially so on digital geographies. She recently did a handbook, which I consider as exciting and really forward-looking. So Anke, thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much. Excuse me. We have then Laura Esnaola, and Laura has founded Care with Care, a training platform that connects German healthcare institutions to underemployed nurses all around the world. So a new approach, and she will speak about that. She has been active in training hundreds of refugee women to enter the German labor market, and she is a highly appreciated thinker in this field. And last but not least, we have Fernando. He's from the Philippines. He's at present a consultant and sits on the advisory board of the Labor Mobility Partnerships. He will speak about that. That is a Washington-based nonprofit field builder developing scalable solutions for workers to access quality jobs across borders. So I leave it here. And we have the same rules of the game as same procedure as every year. So we have each speaker to speak for about 12 to 15 minutes, and then we have time for discussions afterwards. And we invite you to send your questions or comments into the chat, and we are pleased to have the speakers here. I hand over to the first speaker, Anke. Pleased to see you.
Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation and for getting to know, especially Jay and Laura and Felicitas. We know each other before. So what I am going to talk is actually the platformization of care services, but not in the sense of qualified care work or recruitment in a truer sense, but really the mediation of care work gigs. But still, some points I'm going to make on the invisibilities, insecurities, and inequalities related to this kind of platform-mediated care work are hopefully worth discussing. Yes. So I will give a very short introduction to what I mean by platformization of care services, and then I will turn to these three special points. Care work, that's always important to remind because it's so ordinary that we often forget to mention it. Care work has traditionally been always related to private spaces at home, the care work I'm talking about, so not nurses, for example. And it has traditionally been associated with women's unpaid, mostly unpaid reproductive work. So that's context number one. Context number two is the current care crisis, which refers to social and societal structures and deficit. But this deficit obviously have always impacts on individual households. So although the care crisis, to at least what I refer, quoting Fraser and Dowling and so on, is a social phenomenon and social problem, but it has always impacts on the individual households. The result, and now I quote Nancy Fraser, the result of the care crisis, and the care crisis is a result of the progressive capitalist regimes, amid rising inequality, is a dualized organization of social reproduction, its commodification for those who can pay for it and privatized for those who can not. In the 21st century, care service work rests on the neoliberal paradigm, and Felicitas has already mentioned this, that caring is an entrepreneurial activity that should be properly organized through markets and competition. But I always need to add that we can't leave aside the social and household sphere of the care crisis. So when I'm talking about the platformization of care service, I'm talking about service platforms such as care.com or Helpling or Bedmate. Bedmate is a Swiss platform, which operate as intermediaries between demand and supply, between workers and clients. They realize profit not by providing the care or the task or the gigs as such, but by building digital networks on this platform between workers and customers. And this is, in most of the times related to child or senior care, to cleaning. And actually, we also include fast services for food delivery, because this is also part of reproductive work at home. Platform-mediated services consider care work as a commodity, as single gigs. So this is clearly different from nurses. And these gigs can be bought flexibly and anonymously, and they can also be cancelled very flexibly. And all these gigs that are done are then disembedded from any kind of social and emotional networks of trust, public policies, and legal frameworks. So the care service platforms seem to solve the care crisis for time-poor yet affluent households, and they pose at the same time very urgent questions regarding the spatial invisibilities, labor insecurities, and social inequalities imbued in these types of care services. So spatial invisibilities, first of all, relates to the tradition of the invisibility of care work at home and to the intersecting gendered, class and racial precarities and vulnerabilities related to mostly unpaid care work. Invisibility, but nowadays in the platform time, also applies to the algorithms which platforms use to mediate these care services, these gigs. The matchmaking between the clients and the clients and the workers is often reduced to invisible data-driven and algorithmic mechanisms, so nobody can see how the matchmaking really takes place. And it's controlled by the platforms and sometimes also based on clients' reputations and rankings of workers online, but the workers don't have any kind of impact how this matchmaking takes place. So despite becoming more formalized and even paid work, care service matchmakings remain invisible, and paid care work in private homes also remains hidden. And it remains hidden in a twofold sense, from public side and as still and again being an essential part for social and societal reproduction. With this in mind, I turn to the second point, labor insecurities. Digital platforms transform conditions and also experiences of work. They offer lower thresholds for accessing work, especially for people who cannot find conventional jobs or who are undocumented migrants, for example. But they also increase job precarity, very low wages, and lack of legal protection, legal representation, and any kind of social benefits. Care work has traditionally been characterized as precarious and informal labor. Felicitas already mentioned this, but the commodification of care work via platform results in a formalization of the informal economy, care work, but to a very selective formalization only, because the platforms are registered at companies and they pay taxes, for example, but usually they refuse to adopt the status and especially the obligations of employers. The engagement as independent contractors for the workers subverts the formalization by diminishing any kind of legal rights and status. And the third point, social inequalities, relates to the fact that especially in Central Europe, due to the traditional gender division of labor, a lot of, or the majority of care workers nowadays, of gig care workers, are migrants. And care service platforms rely on intersectional inequalities linked still to gender, to class, and also to citizenship status. And these inequalities seem to be essential features for care service platforms mediating gigs. Care platforms create value and profit from the mediation process, not from the work as such. They exploit existing socioeconomic and cultural inequalities on all scales, but including obviously the local, but also the international, the global one. And they manifest, or they tend to manifest, these inequalities. So the platformization of care service in my talk related to this gig economy and gig platforms, is this a benefit or downside for international workers? I don't know. But for both parts, there are ideas. Is this kind of gig work, gig care work, a benefit or a stepping stone? It might be, because gig work might be a solution, a temporary solution, especially for newly arriving migrants, or also for undocumented migrants who are not, who stayed longer already, but are still don't have the legal documents for work. Is this a downside or a dead end? Most of these gig workers work as independent contractors, so it's kind of exploitation of the desperate people. They have to work with the lowest working standards without any security, without any benefits, and without a future. Some of them are so desperate they even work on borrowed accounts and profiles. They don't even can set up their own profile on a platform, not because they are not able to, but because they are illegally in Germany or Austria, for example. So I would like to quote Ursula Hughes here, that there is no simple technological fix for the problem of housework. referring to the care crisis as such. And I would argue that the discussion urgently needs to go beyond disruptive technologies and migrant gig work, but also encompass the society care crisis as such. We always have to think these parts together, or have to think the platform-mediated care work as part of the care crisis. And the second point, and this is my kind of handing over to Laura, that we need to discuss alternatives to disruptive technologies and look what technologies can do and how they can be applied to deal with the care crisis and to deal with mediating care services.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anke, and thank you for handing over so nicely to Laura. Laura, would you please come in?
Hi, everyone. I'm figured out how to unmute myself. Let me figure out how to share my screen. And I think I'm ready. Very good. Thank you very much, Anke. So today, I am going to give a practical approach to what Care with Care, my company, is doing in terms of technology. And we believe that technology can be a driver for more transparent cross-border employment. So let me give a quick introduction to Care with Care. What do? We're a cross-border employment platform for foreign nurses around the world and German healthcare institutions. And we're addressing an ever-growing nursing shortage in Germany, which is supposed to reach up to 270,000 by 2030. My co-founder, Stefan Zoller, and I started Care with Care in 2013. And back in the day, we were a pen and paper recruiting agency. About 2.5 years ago, we turned that pen and paper recruiting agency into a tech platform. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. About 2 years ago, we also launched Care Forward. That is a government certified training institute that actually helps nurses in Germany for about 2 years on additional trainings for integration, nursing skills, as well as language skills. And going back to what Felicitas said at the beginning, that word about responsibility, I want to tie it back to this because we started Care Forward because we saw that there was a gap in the market. We saw that there was a gap. We were bringing nurses to Germany, but they were not succeeding as well as we wanted them because they weren't properly integrating upon arriving in Germany. So that's an example of how a company can step up and take on responsibility. And what I'm going to talk about today in terms of technology, I actually believe that if you use technology in the right way, you can also already start with proper integration on the candidate's journey to Germany, even before they arrive, if you bring in that transparency. And as I said, I think technology can be a driver for that. Quickly, we received the seal, Fair Migration seal from the government earlier this year, which basically we were audited to make sure that we have an ethical recruiting practice and standards. We work with over 50 healthcare institutions in Germany, and we recruit from over 20 countries. Those are countries that are not on the WHO scarcity list. So let me jump into the technology side of the conversation. We surveyed over 300 foreign nurses to understand what are your needs, what are your fears, what do traditional recruitment models, non-tech ones, what are they missing? And we can summarize it into 3 buckets.
Did you load up your presentation?
Oh, wait, you can't see it?
No?
Oh.
Sorry.
Thank
I thought it was starting now.
No, I'm so sorry. So, okay,
Wait.
Let me go back just very quickly. That was the slide you missed.
Okay.
Sorry, that's Stefan, my co-founder, myself, Care Forward, the seal that Felicitas was talking about before, and who we work with, our clients and our countries. So with that, I'm glad you told me because I think this visually helps. Thank you, Felicitas.
Helps a lot.
Three buckets of what we heard from foreign nurses. One is they don't understand what their conditions, the program conditions and their rights are. So will I have to pay to make it to Germany? Will I have to repay once I start getting paid and getting paychecks in Germany? What are the employment conditions? How much will I get paid? Vacations? Can I quit my job? What happens if I do? The deployment plans, unclear as in once I get there, who takes care of me? What are the logistics? How do I become a registered nurse once I'm in the country? When will I get my first paycheck? Super important questions. So those are the conditions. The second topics are guidance and timelines, so that you get into the mindset of a foreign nurse wishing to go work to Germany. The journey can take anywhere from 12 to 18, 24, 36 months. And the candidates don't fully understand what is the qualification recognition process, like what documents, the processing, the timing, the interview process. Can I choose an employer, or will I be told who I work with once I get to Germany? You would be surprised how many nurses arrive in Germany without knowing actually where they're going to work or how much they're going to make. Another important part is the language journey. How do I learn German? How do I pass the B1 and B2 exams? And then the third bucket is motivation. As I just said, the journey is long. And sometimes these nurses don't hear back from the employers, from the German authorities. Motivation, right? So at Care with Care, we decided, can we bring in technology to address the three buckets? And I want to show you a few of the products that we have put together. The first one is the journey dashboard. And our mantra is clarity provides confidence and trust. What do I mean by that? So as you see here on the right, this is actually a candidate journey that a candidate sees on a daily basis now when they go on our platform. And it shows anything from your progress. So this candidate is 20% there, and they probably will need another 12 months to make it to Germany. And as you see below, there are milestones, that it's basically like a GPS system that is going to help the nurse every step of the way in their 12 to 18, 24 months journey. And what is important here is that in order to get from one milestone to the other, they have to complete all of the different steps. And we believe that clarity, we're giving them clarity with every step. They know their timelines, so they feel in control, and they know what to expect. So as you see at the very beginning, they have to approve the terms and conditions. They should have that knowledge and power to not only know where they're going, but very often candidates have the wrong degree or will never make it. So it's very important to actually help candidates understand whether this is made for them or not. We have over 1,000 emails, reminders, triggers, and that they're receiving in this journey. And part of it is on the platform. So for example, we will remind them you have an interview tomorrow, or you're missing some information, or your document has been approved. The candidate receives notifications every couple of days so that that motivation part and transparency is accessible to them. And very important, Felicitas was talking about the global South, mobile first. I mean, these candidates are a younger generation, they're on their mobiles. So very important from the very beginning is we're focused on creating a great mobile experience for them. So that's the dashboard, which is the GPS. It's like the mecca for the candidates to understand every step of the way. Another crucial one is the document center. Why? Because access to information is power. Very often, you would be surprised, candidates don't know what data they've shared, what contracts they've signed. And as I said before, the bureaucracy of the qualification, recognition, etc., they don't know what their status is. So as you see here, we've created a document center where the nurses have access to every single piece of information that is relevant to them. We believe that that gives them power. Very important is the application center. Why? Because choice fosters quality. And I'm going to walk you through how we actually match candidates with employers. So the step number one is a candidate profile. And this is a simplified version. So a candidate shares their background and experiences. Under each one of these sections, there are hundreds of checkboxes that the nurses can tell us their skills, their experience, but also their interests. Where do they want to work? What type of an employer? What type of department do they see themselves growing into? The second step is the client side. The client has to sell itself, basically. We're trying to change the balance of power of how this recruiting happens. And you will see in a second why. The clients, the employers, have to write about their employer benefits, opportunities, conditions, and create a very concrete role description with prerequisites. And then our matching algorithm comes to work. We don't just match the basic information from both the employer and the nurse. We actually also look at the long-term fit. So as you see here, for example, the employer will tell us what departments they have in the organization, maybe not that they're looking for right now. So we may have candidates who say, look, I understand that I don't have operating room experience at first, so I'm okay with taking a different role, but I know that in the next 3 to 5 years, I want to grow into this position. So we're doing our best to match, as I said, not just the hard facts and skills, but really the growth potential of our candidates. And the quality, it's all about long-term careers for these nurses. Very interesting, I think, is one thing that we've changed is that the candidate chooses first. So as you see here, a candidate will go to the application center, and these are fake employers. So employer Y, Z, and X. And the candidate can look at a profile, can look at the job ad, and the candidate can then decide, I want to interview with this employer. That is when we then, after that, we share the profile with the employers. And what I wanted to share with you is because we have adopted this candidate first approach, as you see here, the numbers of the matching rates are incredible. So from profile sharing to interview, we have 92%. The candidates that interview, 81% of them get a job offer. And the ones that receive a job offer, 99% sign the contract. So we believe that bringing this transparency and having created this algorithm is actually helping both sides, the candidates and the employer, in bringing in transparency. And last, about this application center, is that everything happens on the platform. So as you see here, there will be scoring from all sides. The employer, the candidates can score the employers, Care with Care can score everyone to make sure that our standards are high. We give feedback. So if a candidate doesn't pass, we share it over the platform and by phone, and we give them tips to improve for next time. The contract sharing happens over the platform. And one thing that is very important to me is that the candidate can reject. They can reject an interview. They can reject an employment offer. They're free to choose who they want to work with. And that's very important. Another component that is important in our platform is the resources center, because we need our candidates to be prepared and give them all the tools. So just briefly, we're continuously adding content. Candidates are telling us what they need, what is missing. And we believe that this is a very important part to prepare our candidates, as I said, not just during the journey, but also for once they arrive in Germany. And the driving force behind everything I just showed you is analytics, growth, scale, and quality. We're tracking absolutely every interaction. We're tracking every email when it was opened, how quickly the candidates give us their documents, how well they react to certain feedback, all of that, in order to improve our offering. Why? Because we can then figure out we're not explaining the step well enough. Candidates are falling through the cracks at this other stage. We can improve through data. The other part is what we said before about the quality match. We're tracking our candidates now, but we will continue to track them within 1, 2, 3, maybe more years once they're in Germany. And hopefully we can, through our algorithms and data, help candidates and employers find the best match, as in certain personalities or certain backgrounds might fit better with a certain employer. And that is something that we can figure out through data. And the last part is the motivation of candidates. And I say this because we see that the most engaged candidates are the ones that make it to Germany more quickly, are the ones that truly want this opportunity. And we can find this out through data. And if we do that, we can actually pre-invest more in the candidates, give more scholarships, give more opportunities to people that truly, truly want to make it to Germany. And we can do that through analytics. So conclusions. Tech is crucial, and we talked about it today, but there's more. These are my key to success in cross-border employment. The first one is humility and the candidate-first approach. We're sitting in Berlin, in Brussels. We cannot forget that at the center of what we do is the candidates, and we need to hear their stories and make sure that whatever we produce from a technology or product side, it's for the candidates. And we don't always have the best answers. We have to get the feedback from our stakeholders. The second one is operational excellence. I showed you shiny technology, but behind it are 10,000 steps that actually get the candidates from enrolling all the way to Germany. And we need to be very good at operationally getting the candidates to Germany. The third one is responsibility, the word that Felicitas mentioned before. We have to take responsibility for the well-being of these candidates, whatever it is, whether it's through technology, whether it's through customer service, whether it is through Care Forward, as I said before, that we launched. It's our responsibility to bring in the candidates safely to Germany. And last but not least, I would say a team that cares. You have to hire the right people that actually are mission-driven and understand what we're doing. Last but not least, today I talked about the healthcare side of cross-border recruitment from the world to Germany. But as you see here, by 2030, we're expecting 700 million OECD job vacancies, not just in the healthcare sector. And so my conclusion is that ethical cross-border recruitment is more relevant than ever. I also believe that technologies, such as the platform technology I just proposed today, can become a game changer. However, no matter what, we require very strong public-private partnerships in order to move the needle. And with that, maybe I'll pass it on to Jay, who's going to talk a bit more about precisely these public-private partnerships, and as an example from the Philippines, and see what works and what doesn't. And hopefully we can continue the discussions at the Metropolis conference in a month.
And also before, thank you so much, Laura. And Jay, I just hand over to you. The floor is yours. Thank you, Laura.
I just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, the screen is fine.
Thank you very much. Guten Tag allerseits. It's funny, everyone's talking in English, and the one from the Philippines is the one wearing the coat, and trying to greet everyone in German. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you, Anke, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Felicitas. So I'm going to start. So my name is Jay Fernando. As Felicitas has said, I currently serve on the advisory board of Labor Mobility Partnerships. I'm also deputy CEO of a private equity firm based out of the Philippines, an international private equity firm that's based out of the Philippines. And I directly handle 5 different companies, oversee 5 different companies that are involved in labor mobility in different sectors. And also in training and in catering and in logistics. But that's just the introduction. So okay, so thank you. So let's start. I'm sure, well, I don't know whether you remember who this guy is. So his name is Morpheus, and he was famous in a movie for offering the blue pill or the red pill? And I think the question about platform technologies, and you will see, has initially been posed as either a choice between the red pill or a blue pill. But as you've heard from our previous speakers, it is not as simple as that. My first experience in labor mobility or migration of workers or migration of labor was way back in 1972. I was 4 years old, and my uncle, who was a practicing physician, decided to migrate from the Philippines to the United States and practice there. Back then, a hospital or a care institution would contact, in the receiving country, would contact an agency or a manpower placement agency in the sending country. They will look for candidates, they will present them to the employer, and then the employer will choose, and then the process of deployment happens, the employment contracts are engaged, and it was as simple as that. And that was back in 1972. Now, and that was for a doctor, basically, right? So, but fast forward, as the years have gone, an evolution has happened. So, and specifically for the care sector, because I think as far as the different types of skill sets and work we're in international labor is part of, the care sector is a very, very, shall we say, I wouldn't call it unique, but I would call it special, simply because we're dealing with people, not only the candidates, but we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with people who have to know what they're doing. I mean, that's basically it. You need to be sure that the person knows what they're doing. Every country has their form of regulatory systems to make sure, educational systems, training certifications, to make sure that the care workers, whether they be nurses, PTs, doctors, or even just simple caregivers, senior caregivers, have the skills and the mentality to be able to perform the work, simply because we're dealing with people. And because of that, well, sorry, before I move there, one other aspect of this migration, which we should never forget, is that everyone who leaves a family in their home. So this is actually the most basic ecosystem of labor migration. It's like the recruitment agent, the employer, the family that's left at home. And because the Philippines GDP is 12% coming from remittances, there has to be that financial institution that kind of arranges the movement of money. So this is the most basic framework of labor migration. Well, at least when I woke up, when it first happened in 1972. But as things have moved, especially in the care sector, then, as I said, each and every jurisdiction would have a means of certifying, making sure that the care professional actually underwent the proper training and are certified to be able to provide this service, simply because it is very sensitive. We're dealing with people. And I will keep repeating that over and over again. And now, when we start talking about movement from the sending country to the receiving country, these certifications and these licenses and this will have to be recognized by the receiving jurisdiction. Laura has talked about qualification recognition, which is a very important process in the movement of nurses from anywhere to Germany. And that is understandable, that there is this particular process that needs to take place. And with that particular process, there is another key stakeholder in the mix. And because all of this is highly regulated, the governments will always have regulatory oversight and compliance with all the players. And as Felicitas mentioned previously, there were bilateral labor agreements that are between the sending jurisdictions or the sending country and the receiving country when it comes to labor migration. Actually, even with the Philippines, the Philippine government would want to have a particular oversight over the migrant worker program with the employer. So there is that relationship involved. Now, some countries don't do that or don't have that, but the Philippines has probably the most advanced bureaucracy when it comes to the movement of labor, because of the experience of having this system since the early 1970s. So there is that dynamic as well. And of course, the governments would have to provide social and migrant support. The sending country provides that to the migrant worker, and the receiving country would have welfare and residency interactions with the migrant worker. And these involve transactions, and these involve processes as well. Now, we can even become more complicated because some of the employers or the hospitals and the care sectors in the receiving country would appoint a local manpower supply service, which will then appoint manpower supply service or manpower service provider in the sending country, and all of this would always want to be regulated or would have to have oversight by. So I mean, just look at this. Just look at this, and the number of stakeholders just increases exponentially. The number of transactions increase exponentially, and the amount of information that needs to flow between all of these stakeholders and players are so high, and it just contributes to this type of complexity. So, and of course, you can even break it down. Some manpower agencies have sub-recruiters, government agencies. There are different government agencies that regulate the training centers, that regulate the immigration process, that regulate the labor conditions, and you can imagine how that complexity arises. Some of us, I've been in the recruitment industry, in labor mobility industry for running on 18 years now. And looking back, sometimes I wish I had taken the blue pill, not the red pill, and not gotten it. But, that's just part of the game. Now, in all of these complexities, now platform technologies, and I would like to show a very broad segment of where platform technologies have taken root. The largest segment, or the most common segment, where platform technologies have taken, have been used in this ecosystem is on the recruitment side. We have, like Anke said, platforms, matching platforms, recruitment platforms. We have platforms like Indeed. In the Philippines, we have Work Abroad. And these platforms essentially, as Laura said, tries to facilitate the matching process, the search process, the application process, to make it easier and make it faster. Now, social media is another huge platform that has been used in recruitment. The advertisement of jobs. I remember when I started in this business, international jobs are posted in the newspapers, right? Trusted newspapers. Now, everyone is using Facebook, LinkedIn, and all of these things. And information about available jobs are just so massive. It's something like, and to a certain extent, that's probably where we need to exercise a little bit of caution. In the Philippines, when I was growing up, there was only one kind of beer, San Miguel beer. That's the only beer I could get. And it was in bottles. So I knew how many bottles I drank. And I could, basically, there was limitations imposed on me, and there was this feedback mechanism that tells me when I'm overdoing it. But I remember my first experience of Oktoberfest in Munich. It was like in steins that were like, liter size, and it was just free flowing, and you never know. And I guess in that, in terms of information flow via social media, in terms of recruitment, that is the kind of thing that we are facing. And in that kind of instance, it bears upon us, well, at least for the one who's drinking or for the one who's absorbing it, to be a little more discriminatory and exercise self-control. And it also falls upon the actors to actually self-regulate and provide some restrictions with regards to information flow. But that is where the biggest impact of platformization, as far as I could see. There has been moves in the regulatory processes. The Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, which is now the Department of Migrant Workers over here in the Philippines, has always had access to viable information in their webpage. They've used the web platform to provide information and guidance to workers for a very long time. Visa processes are now online. There have been a lot of visa processes, immigration processes wherein you upload documents and all of these things. And again, it's just primarily for transparency and efficiency. And of course, sending and receiving money. Western Union used to be the thing, the way to remit. Now you can log onto your mobile phone and click and transfer money. Now, but I think the biggest impact of platform technology is in the family relationships with regards to migrant workers. When I was younger, I remember my cousins would receive a packet of cassette tapes from their father in Saudi Arabia. Like their father would record their messages on these 90-minute cassette tapes and would add up and then send it over. And then they would be listening to this over and over and over again. And then they would overwrite what their father sent and use the same cassette tapes to send back messages to their dad in Saudi Arabia. I mean, that was how migrant worker family relationships happened before. But now with Zoom, with Facebook Messenger and everything, it has greatly improved the relationships between the migrant worker, has made the migrant worker less susceptible to mental health issues and all of these things. So there are benefits. Now, are these things perfect? No, they're not. I think there's a lot more improvement that needs to be made. However, I think we need to recognize the benefits. Are there also what we call this areas of abuse in these platforms? There is definitely, and that is something that we need to always be watchful of in the use of these technologies and in the development of one. I love what Laura said, that platform development has to have a sense of responsibility to it. But if you look at this, if you look at all of these things, it's basically aimed at one thing: making the process more efficient and transparency of information. That's the overall guidance in the use of platform technologies. Now, I'm just going to quickly run through two samples that I think I know Laura has shared a wonderful sample, but I'm going to give two samples that just some things I've used. Something that is already in use, first of all, is NMC Online. This is the Nursing and Midwifery Council Online. The NMC is the regulating body for skills recognition for the UK. NMC Online has probably had the most, and I've seen the evolution of NMC Online for several years. Now it provides, it's very easy to use, it's intuitive, it is efficient in the provision of information and the search of information. When you're an applicant and you want to find out how, it just gives it to you step by step. It's very accessible on multiple devices and platforms. One thing, it allows for document upload and verification of instruction. This is one of the things. My certifications or the nurse or the candidate certification and documents can actually be uploaded, and there is a way, and I think they found the system wherein they can actually verify electronic copies of actual certifications to their satisfaction. How they did it, I don't know, but they seem to be happy about it. And the biggest thing, and this boils down to what Laura mentioned a while ago, is that NMC Online provides the applicant with a tracker of where they are in the process. If it takes if you consider the ecosystem that I presented before, getting from your place to your place to the sending country, from the receiving country, from the sending country to the receiving country, it's gonna take time. And you want to actually know where you are at any given time. When you're lost, the first thing you want to find out is where you are. That's why I love Google Maps when I'm driving. So that's one example. Another profile, this news came out a couple of days ago. It's that the new Department of Migrant Workers, which is the newly created department under the in the Philippine government that's specifically for migrant workers. It used to be the POEA, or the POEA was one part of it. Came out with the news that they're going to go paperless with the issuance of their overseas employment certificates. Now, for those of you who are not aware of what the worker needs to go through to get out of the to leave the Philippines to go work abroad, this is one of the key documents that they need to have, which is an overseas employment certificate, which means that they are registered as an overseas worker with the Philippine government, that they know where they're going, they know what their job is, they know what they're paid, and everything else. And this is one of the documents that they need to get. And in order to get this has been very cumbersome, right? Either for the migrant worker or for the recruitment agencies. It has improved over time because the POEA has instituted a lot of online digitalization, online platforms wherein we can actually assist in the processing. But now they're moving further and saying, okay, the OECs don't need to be paper. It's not yet there, but it is an initiative. And the objective is for easier verification of documents and to reduce fraud. Now, you can say, of course, you can fake electronic documents the same way you can fake paper documents. Yes, but I think there is first of all, it's going to take some time in order to start faking these electronic documents. Plus the fact that what do you call this? It takes a different set of skill set in order to be able to do that. So that is the objective. It's supposed to provide faster and more efficient deployment process. It's designed to actually provide easier record keeping. Like all these records, all this information is actually in a central database, right? And all these documents can now be part of that central database as well. And it does open up the possibilities for other online applications that can be built on that database or can be an offshoot of this particular initiative. In conclusion, I guess the question that we need to ask, or I would like to suggest, is that the question is how do we apply platform technologies, and I would like to suggest some principles that we can put in this application. Or first of all, has to make this complex ecosystem easier. It cannot make it. It's supposed to make it easier for all the stakeholders concerned: the government, the recruitment agent, the care worker, the banks. It has to be easier. And if it contributes to that, then we can move. Then we can start considering that application. The second one, and I love this because I didn't speak to Laura. Laura hasn't seen this. The other one is clarity, right? Transparency. I think platform technologies provide us with an opportunity to make some of these transactions more transparent to each other. We don't want to be hiding our aces in the hole, right? We want, and I think that provides for a better provides for better regulation and provides for better, just a more efficient ecosystem as well. The third one is it has to be people-centric. At the center of it is the care worker, but we cannot forget that all of these stakeholders involve people. It involves people reviewing the QR packages that we send over that are this thick, and it has to be translated into German. It involves people. People are actually looking at these documents. The care worker, the person that the care worker is thinking about or will be taking care of is a person. I mean, every part of this ecosystem is about people, and that's why all of these platform technologies, when we try to apply it, has to consider the people themselves that are going to be using it, and it has to be people-centric. The fourth one is that we cannot forget that this is an ecosystem. We apply a platform technology in one area, we have to be able to consider what its impact is on the other area. We want to put in a regulation that addresses a particular shall we say, sin or fault within the ecosystem? What is its impact in another aspect of this ecosystem? We need to be asking those questions when we apply. And the last thing is, looking at this, it reminds me, looking at this ecosystem, it reminds me of the question, how do you eat an elephant? How do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one little bite at a time. And I think in the application of platform technologies, and I love what Anke said, that there is no technology pill. There is none. And I don't think it is a pipe dream. I think it's wishful thinking to think that we will be able to come up with a magic technology that will address all the ills of this particular ecosystem. But we can actually do it one transaction at a time. I leave that to you and transfer it over to
Thank you so
Felicitas.
much, Jay. Yeah,
Thank
you so much for this very visual presentation. Lovely. And also that you hand over to Anke in a way naturally. I would say we have another 15 minutes for discussion also. So I just ask everybody to put your questions or comments in the chat. This is rather familiar with the way we do the webinars, so don't be shy. Anke, please.
Yes, thanks for handing back to me. And I think what became really, really obvious in these three inputs, that we are talking about different kinds of platforms, and it's necessary to make this distinction, because I really love both your projects, and I think they are absolutely wonderful. But what I am concerned about is a very different kind of platform, and we are not even concerned about international migrants, but just migrants who are here already, so to say.
Yeah.
But what I found really inspiring, that you made the point, Jay, that the critique on that we can't take technology as a pill, as you said, it's we mustn't forget that. So thank you both, Laura and Jay, for your inputs, and especially for Laura's part was very insightful for me, because what are the alternatives? And you had made a point in presenting one. So thanks again.
Thank you so much.